guys, this is Jenny, and I'm going to do my third video in my TBT series. It's kind of amazing. I've actually made it to 3 in a row, so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and not jinx it. And I thought I would do some cards today because Valentine's Day is tomorrow, and I was going to do some cards for teachers as a gift. And I like to do a little package to give for my kids to give their teachers, because a friend of mine that was a teacher said she's always in need of thank you notes and that kind of stuff for people giving her gifts. So I thought I might do a little package of 2 or 3 and have one card for them and one for them to give away, kind of thing. We'll see. I'm not quite sure. But I am going to do 3 quick little very simple cards, and I'm going to use Unity stamps, which were some of my very favorite, still are, and first sort of collection where I just almost got every one that I could get my hands on. There were a bunch that came out with Simple Stories when they first started, which I have, but these are all just Unity. They're these itty bitties, and they are great red rubber stamps, cute designs, and so these were a few of my favorites that I thought would make good Valentines. And there's a little tree that says I love you the most. I have a thing for birds, so this is a little bird on a birdhouse. It says where you are I want to be. And then this is a good one for boys, that you're out of this world. So I thought I would use those and combine them with this paper pad I bought after I had run out of some of the pieces of this that were my favorite. This is from Crepe Paper, their Valentine's collection from 2 years ago, I believe. And I love this sort of gray, let's see, this gray chevron. It may not, I've used that like crazy, and the other wood grain one that was in there was gorgeous. So I thought I would use the 3 different ones of those for backgrounds, and then cut out some watercolor paper to stamp these on, and then just do a little quick wash on top of that. And just make it real simple, just the stamp and the greeting and this paper as the background. So that is the plan for that. And I've got this Canson watercolor paper that is 140 pound, and it is cold press, which is pretty smooth, so that will take the stamp better, I believe. I'm going to trim down the watercolor paper and then use this stitch die from Lawn Fawn instead of doing any sewing on it, which I normally might do because I'm trying to do a bunch of these. And then I'm going to use Stays On for the stamp. I've got black, and I've got this dove gray that I thought I might use on the birdhouse just to make it not so stark. So that is the plan. I have my little fun cheapy watercolor set, and then my real watercolors that I've been trying to use more of. So I'm not quite sure which I'm going to use of those. And so I'm going to go ahead and get some water, get set up, and start trimming up my papers.
Okay, I went ahead and sped this up a pretty good bit because I actually ended up spending a lot more time on the watercoloring than I had originally planned. I trimmed this paper down to, I believe, about 3/8 inch bigger than the largest rectangle stitch die in the set, and I cut those out of that. And what was neat was it kind of left a little frame that I'm sure I'll be able to use again for something else. So I cut those, the 3 of those out. And washi, which is normally so wonderful about not pulling paper off, I actually did pull a teeny bit of one of those pieces of watercolor paper off. I don't know if it was the texture, but that's something to keep in mind. So I used my stamp press here to make sure I got a good impression, and actually my Stays On ink that was in this gray color was not very, it's not very juicy, and so I had tested it on a little piece of paper there, and it really stamped splotchy. And it actually ended up being my least favorite of all of them because of that reason. And this one kind of did the same thing, and it ended up being one of my favorites. I used the black StazOn for it, but it was still very very splotchy on the side of it. I think the StazOn just bleeds more because it's the watercolor paper. It absorbs more of it and bleeds more of it out into the grain of the paper, and that's the characteristics of the watercolor paper, which is great for watercolor, but obviously maybe not so great for ink. So that may have been something I should have tested it on. That one little you're out of this world stamp worked great, and it was sort of the main one I was pleased with. So now I'm just going to go through this paper stack and pick out papers that I thought would work well with those images, and while that watercolor paper is drying, I go ahead and trim out those to fit my card base, which are just standard card base sort of stacks that I buy at my craft store. And so I kind of picked them according to what I thought I might color the backgrounds with, or that dark red polka dot I thought was neat because of the holes of the birdhouse. But like I said, I mean, that ended up being my least favorite, and I don't know why. I just ended up spending, and it was very enjoyable. It wasn't that it was a bad thing, but I ended up spending a lot more time on the watercolor washes than I had planned. I kind of just planned to do a quick pass of just some color over it, and ended up, even though it's not more detailed, ended up spending more time on it. Maybe it's because it was the watercolor paper and I just enjoyed watching it play on the paper more. So I did a little wash on the background too. And I ended up almost using my little test paper as a palette just because I wanted to see how it worked. And because the images are so small, I really didn't need like a big pool of watercolor. So I'll go ahead and watercolor this little tree. And the way I have always watercolored has been really loose and really free, and which is goes against just about everything in my personality, but it's the way I have always done it, and I've tried to kind of do it a little bit differently because of my just my trying to apply it to scrapbooking and different things like that. And I finally just gave up and decided, this is the way I do it. This is the way I've learned how to do it. It's the way I'm comfortable doing it, and I just need to do it that way. And it may not work with it, it may not blend, it may not be, whatever, but that's the way I do it. It's the way I'm fastest with it. Well, maybe not in this case, but usually, and that's the way I enjoy it. So I just decided to give it up to what works for me. So there you go. That's my little bit of philosophical watercoloring, painting, scrapbooking theory. I loved how that dark purple came out. It sort of the background kind of starry sky, but I kind of planned to do a little bit more underneath that, but I didn't want to mess up the sentiment underneath it, so I just watercolored the little inside of the world. And these would probably be better for, at least the little, bitty parts might be better for Copic markers, but since I had a good tip brush and had my watercolors out, it was just a little bit faster for that. It did bleed a little bit into those little hearts, but in the end it was okay because I ended up using some stickles over it. I used a Copic multi-liner to kind of outline some of this and draw a little bitty ground line in with some little kind of little grass bits in there, which I think helped a lot. And this one I didn't want to use the Copic color because it was gray. I mean, it was black. So I used a gray Copic, and it ended up being really thick. And I think that's why I didn't end up liking that birdhouse one as much. But anyway, so I did the background of this one, and I did sort of wet on wet color and just let it flow a little bit and tried to give a little bit of shadow to that left side underneath the tree. And I kept coming back to it and coming back to it. But like I said, I mean, I did have fun, and I tried to make the pinks match the papers, and that was pretty much the only tie to that. I thought the sort of watercolor or the water part of that world kind of went with the background paper I chose for it, but not too much. I mean, so that's kind of how those ended up, the three of those, with the papers they belong to. And here I'm just using one of my Copic colors to color in the little bitty parts of that stamp sentiment underneath it. And then after drying it with my heat tool, I use a little bit of some Wink of Stella marker on the bird and the birdhouse, and then a little bit of stickles on there. After I adhered these to the stamps, I decided to trim them down. Adhered them to the that base paper. I decided to trim them down a little bit so there would be another border on top of the white card base, just to kind of give it another little pop of color against the base I chose. And I chose it with the bottom heavier, and then trimmed the top part in the left and right side, which kind of went with at least the first couple, that tree and the world watercolor pieces, which I think are the two I'm going to use. So after I get all those adhered on there, and that did help kind of doing it almost when they were a little bit wet to help stretch it out while it was drying onto the card base. It kind of helped stretch it out. So I used some stickles on there, and I kind of made a mess of it and went back and forth, and I used that Wink of Stella pen there. I really wanted to outline that bird, but I was afraid I was going to mess it up, so that is the way it turned out. Thanks so much for watching. You can see the close-ups here and the end products, and I will catch you next week for another TBT. I'd love any comments or feedback you have, and see you next time.